Storiz podcast.
Imagine stepping into an arena, right? Like 20,000 people just absolutely screaming for blood.
Oh yeah, deafening. Just an electric atmosphere.
You are standing across from a guy whose only goal, literally his only goal, is to separate you from consciousness.
It's terrifying to even think about.
The tension is, it's thick enough to choke on. And instead of bracing for impact, instead of letting the adrenaline take the wheel, you start doing math.
Right, which is just wild.
Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. We are examining the Vurugu Fight between Majembe and Mbavu. It's this legendary clash that completely shook up the combat sports landscape.
Truly changed the game.
Exactly. And our mission today is to break down the anatomy of a statement victory. Like, we're looking at what actually happens when one fighter brings a chess player's mindset into a literal mosh pit.
And to unpack all those mechanics, we are pulling really heavily from a recent review by the commentators over at Storiz.
Right, specifically the breakdown from Xmilez and Vinkxwts.
Yeah, because their analysis goes way beyond just the scorecards. I mean, they focused on the psychological warfare and, the underlying strategy of the matchup. They really detailed how this fight was won before the final sequence even began.
And the baseline tension heading into this event was just staggering. Like, before we even talk about the bell ringing, you have to look at how both fighters presented themselves during those final moments.
Oh, absolutely. The Storiz review made a huge point of that contrast.
Yeah, because Mbavu stepped in looking like this absolute force of nature, just strong, incredibly confident, and you could tell he was visibly carrying the energy of the crowd.
He was feeding off it. While Majembe, on the other hand, well, the commentators noted, he was almost unsettlingly calm.
Yeah, almost too calm. Right?
Exactly. He stepped into that pure chaos, just completely focused and composed.
Which is so interesting because Vinkxwts emphasized that on paper, nobody really viewed this as a mismatch.
No, not at all. It wasn't supposed to be a technical showcase. It was billed entirely as this pure power versus power collision between two absolute titans.
Right. And see, I've always struggled with that specific framing. Like, if an event is billed as power versus power, and you have two fighters genuinely matched in raw strength, shouldn't the physics of that just result in a coin toss?
I mean...
Well, if two massive freight trains hit each other, the result isn't a strategic masterpiece, right? It's just double wreckage.
Right, mutual destruction.
Exactly. It feels like a fight like that should just come down to, I don't know, whoever happens to land the heaviest hook in the first 30 seconds. Like, why wasn't it just a double knockout?
Well, that assumes fighting is just a pure equation of mass and acceleration.
Which, I mean, it kind of is, isn't it?
Sometimes, sure. If human beings were just physics, a double knockout would make total sense.
Huh.
But a fight is a dynamic system, and the Storiz review really highlights that Majembe didn't treat the fight as a collision at all.
He treated it as a calculation.
Exactly.
Huh.
Xmilez pointed out that Majembe was running an algorithm, while his opponent was relying on pure concussive force. He brought a totally computational approach to a brawl.
Which means we really need to look at how a computational approach actually survives in a high-speed environment. Because, running an algorithm sounds great until you're getting punched in the face.
Yeah, everybody has a plan until they get hit, right?
But the Storiz crew, they laid out this really highly specific timeline of how Majembe managed the escalation. They didn't just summarize the rounds. They tracked the temperature of the room.
And that timeline is so crucial to understanding his strategy. According to Xmilez and Vinkxwts, round 1 was a strict feeling out process.
It's feeling out, yeah.
Then round 2, you start seeing the pressure steadily building.
And it wasn't until round 3 that the pure chaos finally erupted. It really makes me think of cooking, like boiling water for pasta.
Okay, I like that.
You don't just dump the dry noodles into the pot when the water's cold, right? You have to wait for the environment to change.
You need the heat to be right.
Exactly. Majembe's early round pacing was deliberately waiting for the temperature to rise. He used round 1 to measure the pot, round 2 to let the pressure build, and he waited for the exact right boiling point in round 3 before making his actual move.
He absolutely refused to rush the heat.
Yeah.
And honestly, the level of neurological discipline required to maintain that pacing is staggering. I mean, biological instinct screams at you to fight or flee immediately when you're in that much danger.
Oh, for sure. The crowd's energy alone is enough to trigger a massive adrenaline dump.
But by holding back and deliberately using those early rounds strictly for data collection, Majembe overrode his own survival instincts.
He was entirely comfortable living in the danger zone.
Exactly. He didn't need a quick knockout to feel safe. When a fighter is feeling out an opponent like that, they are mapping the variables. Majembe was testing Mbavu's range, observing how he distributed his weight during feints, logging how long it took him to reset his feet.
He was basically surveying the architecture of the building before he planned the demolition.
That's a great way to put it. He compiled a massive mental database of micro-movements.
But, okay, so the water is finally boiling at the start of round 3, and the pure chaos begins. How does he actually weaponize that environment? Because having a mental map of your opponent is useless unless you pull the trigger.
Right. And the two Storiz commentators highlighted this specific transition as the definitive turning point.
The gear shift.
Yes. Xmilez detailed this pivotal gear shift where Majembe just abruptly abandoned the pacing he had spent 2 rounds establishing.
Amidst all that rising chaos, he fired off an incredibly quick, sharp combo straight to the target. And the crazy detail from the review is that Mbavu completely failed to see it coming.
He was totally blind to it.
And I really want to dig into the mechanics of that, because Xmilez mentioned the combination was, quote, masked by the pacing. Wait, how does pacing actually render a punch invisible?
Well, it really comes down to neurological calibration. During rounds 1 and 2, Majembe established a very specific rhythmic tempo. Let's say he was moving and striking on a steady 4/4 beat.
Like a metronome.
Exactly like metronome. After several minutes of this, Mbavu's brain calibrated its defensive expectations to that specific timing. His visual cortex was literally primed to look for threats on the beat.
Ah, I see where this is going.
So when Majembe shifted gears in round 3, he didn't necessarily throw the punch faster.
He just threw it early.
Yes, he threw it a half beat early. He completely bypassed Mbavu's neurological expectations.
Wow. So by the time Mbavu's brain registered the visual data of the punch, the physical impact had already happened.
Exactly.
He broke the rhythm to hack the defense. That is just brilliant.
It is. And Vinkxwts noted that the immediate aftermath of that combination caused a massive psychological shift in the arena.
Yeah, the physical control of the ring shifted, but more importantly, Mbavu's entire demeanor changed. Like, he went from being a confident, equal aggressor matching Majembe's power
to suddenly just reacting.
Merely reacting, yeah. And the commentators zeroed in on this shift from attacking to reacting as the moment the fight was essentially decided.
It was the beginning of the end.
Oh, wait, let me ask you about that.
Yeah.
Because we know counter-striking relies heavily on elite reaction times, right? Like, if I slip a jab to throw a hook, aren't I technically reacting?
Well, sort of, but...
Why do the two Storiz guys treat reacting as an automatic loss of control? Why is it painted as a death sentence here?
Because there's a fundamental difference between anticipating an action to trigger a planned response and having your neurological processing loop hijacked.
Hijacked. Okay, explain that.
When you are counter-striking effectively, you are anticipating. You bait the opponent into throwing a specific jab so you can slip it.
You're setting a trap.
Right. You are still dictating the timeline. You are asking the question, and they are providing the answer.
That makes sense.
But reacting, in the way Vinkxwts describes it, means you have been genuinely surprised. Your brain has to process the unexpected visual information, formulate a new defensive strategy, send the signal to your muscles, and then execute the movement.
And all that processing lag takes time.
Exactly. It takes a fraction of a second. But by the time you complete that loop, an elite fighter like Majembe has already moved to a new angle and launched the next strike.
So you were just perpetually a step behind, trying to solve a puzzle that has already changed shapes.
You are playing your opponent's game on their timeline and being forced onto the defensive back foot in a state of pure reaction. It drains your cardiovascular endurance rapidly because panic sets in.
I can imagine. It shatters your confidence because nothing you try works. You're no longer participating in a mutual combat event.
You are just surviving a storm.
Which means Mbavu was essentially stuck in the passenger seat of his own match.
Completely.
But, we've seen fighters get arrogant in this exact scenario. They get their opponent in the passenger seat, they realize they have the upper hand, and then they make a fatal mistake. They get sloppy.
Oh, all the time.
So how did Majembe close the show without falling into that trap? Because the finish really separates the great fighters from the merely good ones.
According to Xmilez, Majembe, quote-unquote, smelled the shift. He recognized the exact moment Mbavu transitioned from attacking to reacting.
And a lot of fighters, when they smell that shift, they experience this massive adrenaline dump. They know the opponent is hurt, so they abandon all their technique, wind up and throw massive sweeping punches to force a highlight reel knockout.
Which is usually when they leave their chin completely exposed.
Right. And they get caught by a desperation counterstrike.
But Xmilez emphasized that Majembe actively resisted that urge. Even as he increased the offensive pressure, his composure remained absolute.
He operated more like a bomb technician than a brawler.
A bomb technician?
Yeah, think about it. When a bomb tech realizes the clock is ticking down and the pressure is at its absolute highest, they don't start smashing the device with a hammer.
Oh, I see.
They get incredibly steady. They methodically snip the precise wires needed to disarm the threat. Majembe didn't thrash around, he just tightened his precision.
That's spot on. He maintained his defensive responsibility while amplifying his offensive output. He just kept landing clean, calculated shots.
Snipping the wires.
Exactly. He systematically dismantled Mbavu's remaining defenses, leading to a stoppage that Vinkxwts described as clean, decisive, and leaving zero room for doubt.
He executed the final sequence with the cold efficiency of a professional just finishing a day of work. Though, we should acknowledge that the two Storiz reviewers made sure to highlight Mbavu's resilience.
Oh, without a doubt.
You don't survive to the third round of a chaotic fight against a highly calculating opponent without an immense amount of physical durability and heart.
Mbavu didn't quit. His body simply couldn't keep up with the algorithm.
Yeah, as Xmilez put it, Majembe was just operating on a completely different level that night.
And the broader implications of a victory executed with that level of clinical precision are massive for the sport.
Well, the review noted the immediate crowd reaction was just absolute pandemonium. I mean, they came in expecting a blunt force trauma event, and they were given a masterclass in tension, timing, and strategy.
But beyond the noise in the arena, Vinkxwts focused on the long-term impact. He categorized this not just as a win, but as a definitive statement.
A statement victory.
Yes. A victory of this magnitude sends a very clear message to the rest of the division. Majembe is climbing the ranks rapidly, and this performance put every other contender on notice.
Yeah, Xmilez directed a pretty blunt message to future opponents. Come prepared or don't come at all.
Exactly.
But I wonder about the actual psychology of that statement. Like, does completely dismantling a respected powerhouse like Mbavu actually intimidate the competition? Or does it just paint a massive target on Majembe's back?
It's a bit of both, honestly.
Because doesn't a dominant performance just make every other ambitious fighter want to be the one who finally figures out his algorithm?
Well, the highest level competitors are naturally drawn to the most complex puzzles. They want the opportunity to test themselves against the guy who looks unbeatable. So the target on his back is definitely larger now.
All right.
However, the anxiety stems from the manner of the victory. If Majembe had won via a chaotic, lucky punch in a wild exchange, other fighters would watch the tape and think they could simply outbrawl him.
They would see a path to victory based on their own power.
Exactly. But Majembe won through systematic computational dominance. When future opponents and their coaching staffs study this fight, they will realize that raw power is completely insufficient.
It's not enough anymore.
No. They will understand that if they step into the ring without a flawless strategic game plan, they will end up exactly like Mbavu, neurologically hijacked and trapped in a reactive state.
So the statement he made wasn't just, I hit harder than you. The statement was, I will deconstruct your game plan, I will bypass your reflexes, and I will outthink you while I outfight you.
And that realization achieves a totally unique level of psychological dominance. Before the next contract is even signed, future opponents are already adjusting their entire training camps just to deal with his pacing.
Wow.
They are obsessing over their own rhythms and their own tells. In a very real way, Majembe is forcing them to react to him months before they ever share a ring.
They're in the passenger seat before the fight even gets booked. That is wild.
It really is.
So to bring this all together for you listening, we've traced a remarkable journey of strategic execution today, based on the insights from the two Storiz breakdown.
Yeah, we looked at how Majembe stepped into an environment defined by extreme tension and raw power, and chose to rely on calculation.
We examined the extreme discipline required to treat early rounds purely as data collection, waiting for the opponent's rhythm to solidify before breaking it.
And we dug into the mechanics of that brilliant mid-fight gear shift, where a half-beat change in timing bypassed defensive expectations and forced a dangerous opponent into a purely reactive loop.
Right. And finally, we saw how a clinical, composed, finish acting like a bomb technician rather than a brawler, secured a victory that alters the psychology of an entire division.
The central takeaway from Xmilez and Vinkxwts analysis extends far beyond combat sports, too.
Oh, absolutely.
It illustrates the profound vulnerability of slipping into a reactive state, where you are always operating on someone else's timeline with a processing deficit.
Always a step behind.
Exactly. Conversely, it proves the incredible leverage gained by maintaining computational control, gathering data under pressure, and executing your strategy with precision, even when surrounded by absolute chaos.
It's essentially a framework for navigating any high-stakes environment. So think about a chaotic, high-pressure situation you are currently facing in your own life or career. It could be a conference project, a tough negotiation, or just an overwhelmingly busy season. Ask yourself honestly, are you taking the time to map the variables and strategically dictate the pacing, or have you slipped into just reacting to the punches?